what advice would you give to somebody initiating a youth-adult partnership with a younger, middle school age youth?
Yeah, I worked with a group of youth. We were talking about budget cuts in schools and what they would recommend as solutions, and they were 6th and 7th graders. I think middle school is a really rough age too for kids. They're very self-conscious about what they're saying, and their interactions with each other can also be challenging because they're kind of there's this building a sense of identity. At the same time, they can be rougher on each other than I see in high school and elementary school age. So I think in a youth-adult partnership, a huge part for an adult in that component is to really make the space really welcoming and really like embracing everyone's identity and everyone's kind of weirdness or off speed, and kind of doing that yourself, being authentic with that and not holding back, because they'll kind of build off that sense of acceptance. Because I think people don't like to work with middle school age students because there's tends to be a little bit more kind of going back and forth, name calling and stuff. But I think if you set the grounds for that, there actually can be some really incredible conversations. So the group I was working with, they were talking about how, decisions at, the board and the principal impact them as a student just going to school around budget cuts and what recommendations they would make. So they're having those meaningful conversations that are high stake, right? It's their education. But at the same time, we've created a group dynamic where everyone can kind of talk, everyone's voice is valued, and also that everyone's oddness or weirdness or bizarreness, like I'm up front with it, they're up front with it, and there's a kind of room for acceptance. And then you watch them kind of go back out into the school, and that can be a rougher space for them, but hopefully building on that kind of sense of, yeah, it's okay to be different, and this is a space where we're going to accept and value that. I think actually can be so meaningful at that age. Yeah.
So my experience with young people has been mostly through Boys and Girls Clubs. And so they're at that age where they want to sort of be their own person and have their own space, but they're not quite, maybe old enough to stay at home alone or old enough to drive, those kinds of barriers to independence that they're feeling. And so I think it's that level of respect and that level of making sure that you're really listening to what they're interested in doing, but being honest with the group of students that you're with. And maybe, middle schoolers need a little bit more movement time, and maybe they need a little bit more space to be a little loud and to be a little crazy sometimes, and that's okay, And take some time to talk to some of those students and figure out what's a good meeting place for you guys, what's a good time of day, what kinds of food do you like so that I can make sure there's food available, those kinds of things I think are when you're working with middle schoolers or any different age group, you just have to be honest with who you're working with.
If you were going to say to somebody who'd never worked with you, here are some specific places you can actually get middle school youth involved. Mm-hmm. If you can just share some of those.
Sure. There's a number of ways that I think you can get middle school students involved, and they're at an interesting age, and they're developmentally at an interesting point in their lives. And again, they're not often given opportunities to be leaders. I think we sometimes look at high school students as being leaders and don't necessarily look at how can we be giving leadership opportunities to middle school and even elementary school age youth. There should be opportunities for them to take on leadership roles and work in partnerships with adults. And for middle school students, a couple of examples here is we have an after-school program called After the Bell that's been in existence for 10 years. And that program really started through a youth-adult partnership. We had young people from the middle school on our original committee that organized that program. They were a part of designing what the program would look like. They picked the name for the program. They kind of set the guidelines, the parameters of behavior expectations at the program with adults. They continue to do that in the program, even 10 years later. As the coordinator works with them with that program, she involves them in deciding what kinds of projects they're going to offer or what kinds of community service projects they're going to do. So they're engaged in working in a partnership with her as the coordinator in deciding what that program is going to be. So that's an example of program planning, kind of carrying out that role. The other one would be the Social Norms Project, again, working with the Tomahawk Middle School students. They get a chance to look at the data, design the marketing campaign. They've also done some intercept surveys during lunch hours, and they're doing one right now at the end of the school year. So they get a chance to learn some different skills as a result of that project. So again, they're integral in knowing, what messages are going to resonate with their peers. They're also the ears and eyes out there in the school, in the hallway, saying, yep, I'm hearing kids comment about this poster, so they're definitely seeing it. And they understand that we need to have students seeing it. And it's okay for students to question the posters and the messages. And in fact, we want that. Those are the teachable moments. And then they're also leaders in saying, well, why don't you believe that message? And what do you think? And let's talk about it. And so they become those peer leaders with their fellow peers regarding that. So those are just a couple of examples.